As our world gets smaller, we are more and more exposed to people who differ from us in race, culture, and religious values. Where can we find unity in such a world? By summoning wise men from far off lands to worship Jesus, God demonstrated that this newborn king would transcend the differences that divide us. Matthew chapter 2 opens with wise men coming from the east in search of the newborn king of the Jews. Although we are familiar with the non-biblical story of three wise men, Scripture says that they were all from the east. To people of the New Testament days, that would probably have been from Persia, modern-day Iran. This was a center of much belief in astrology. The Bible steers readers away from horoscopes, yet God uses God's creation to unexpectedly bring people to God's self. In calling these Gentiles from far away, God showed that Christ came for us all. And that brings us to our key verse for today, which reads, "They entered the house and saw the child with his mother, Mary, and they bowed down and worshipped him. Then they opened their treasure chest and gave him gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh." Matthew chapter 2, verse 11. Instead of spending his efforts to thoroughly understand the messianic prophecy, which he knew, Herod diligently listens to what the Magi tell him so that he can destroy the baby he perceives as a rival to his throne. The wise men leave Herod for the 6-mile journey south from Jerusalem to Bethlehem. Herod's instruction to search diligently is disrupted by the star, which at this point truly becomes a guiding star for the first time. The reappearance of the star confirms the correctness of looking for the child in Bethlehem, and it guides the wise men to the specific location. An important word here is the Greek word proago, which is translated went before. The star is now seen as a princely messenger leading an audience into the presence of a powerful king. They were led by the light, not their own wisdom. It was customary in the ancient East for those who had came into the presence of royalty or who had sought the favor of the monarch to present gifts. The treasures opened by the Magi were treasure chests containing their valuables. From these they presented the child, King Jesus, with gifts that were prophetic symbols of the roles he would fulfill in his lifetime. The gold was a gift presented to royalty, thus symbolizing Jesus' role as the long-awaited King of the Jews, the Messiah. The gift of frankincense suggested the divinity, or the priesthood of the child, as it was incense burned on altars. Myrrh suggested the role Jesus would play as the one who would die for the sins of the world. For a second time, the angel of the Lord appears to Joseph in a dream. Joseph is just as faithful to obey God's message this time as he was the last. Abraham went by faith, even though he didn't know where God was leading. So Joseph is going by faith, even though he doesn't know how long the journey will last. Again, Joseph displays his obedience to God. He gives prompt, diligent care and protection to Mary and Jesus. He sets a living example of how to respond to God's commands. His example remains as a model of the importance of exhibiting righteous behavior for church members before each other, and especially for Christian parents before their children. The connection that God is revealing through Matthew's gospel is that Jesus is the perfect embodiment of Israel. Just as Israel came out of Egypt, so Jesus comes out of Egypt. Further, just as the patriarchs in Israel had to flee from the threat of death, so did Jesus. Moving from place to place repeatedly, especially at a young age, makes one feel they do not have a home. Because of this, Jesus knows the nation's sorrows. This is another way that Christ fulfills Isaiah's prophecy of being acquainted with grief, and how he accomplishes the Messiah's role of living our temptations, so that he can be a compassionate high priest. Here's our lesson. The devil is happy to remind us of any excuse to cut ourselves off from one another, creating distance and mistrust between groups that could enjoy unity. Believers must work to bring healing and reconciliation in the areas of racial, cultural, and religious division. How does the gospel especially resonate with minority, refugee, immigrant, or foreign voices? As the Magi worship the Lord their own way, let's welcome the worship of other cultures.